So, hello and welcome back. You get me again for what turns out to be the last chapter of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which seems really abrupt to me. And yeah, I saw that Alice listened to the Mock Turtle doing some interesting singing. Thank you, Aaron, for voicing that, because I don't know if I could have done that nearly as well as you did. And then she's on trial? This is really weird. And I looked, and this is our final chapter of this first book. That's trippy. I don't know what to think about that. This Speaking of trippy, this is kind of a trippy book. It started with her falling down a hole and it ends with her on trial. It's interesting. I definitely have to wonder what on earth was being ingested by Alice or perhaps by Lewis Carroll. I'm not sure who. But I do have a very cool announcement. Before we move on to Through the Looking Glass, we will be watching Alice in Wonderland, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I have a wonderful public domain. I was like copyright free. I was trying to jangle copyright free and public domain into the same word and it wasn't working, but I found a great copy, hopefully, haven't watched it yet, of Alice in Wonderland from 1919. It's a silent movie, and if you are so inclined to watch it with us live on Saturday night, you are definitely invited to do so. We will be watching it at 9 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. And then we'll be moving on to Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, which is the second book in this book. But I guess before we get there, we do have to finish this chapter. So we are going to jump back in and finish up Alice in Wonderland with Chapter 12, Alice's Evidence. "Here!" cried Alice, quite forgetting in the flurry of the moment how large she had grown in the last few minutes, and she jumped up in such a hurry that she tripped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, upsetting all of the jurymen onto the heads of the crowd below, and there lay sprawling around, reminding her very much of a globe of goldfish she had accidentally knocked over a week before. "Alice, you monster." And we have an illustration of this. I love it when I can't see. If you can see, there we go. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay, and began picking them up again as quickly as she could, for the accident of the goldfish kept running in her head, and she had a vague sort of idea that they must be collected at once and put back in the jury box, or they would all die. "The trial cannot proceed," said the king in a very grave voice, "until all the jurymen are back in their proper places. All," he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice as he did so. Alice looked at the jury box and saw that in her haste she had put the lizard in head down, and the poor little thing was waving its tail around in a melancholy way, being quite unable to move. She soon got it out again and put it right. "Not that it signifies much," she said to herself. "I should think it would be quite as much use in the trial one way up as the other." As soon as the jury had a little recovered from the shock of being upset, and their slates and pencils had been found and handed back to them, they set to work very diligently to write out a history of the accident, all except the lizard, who seemed too much overcome to do anything but sit with its mouth open, gazing at the roof of the court. "What do you know about this business?" the king said to Alice. "Nothing," said Alice. "Nothing whatever?" persisted the king. "Nothing whatever," said Alice. That's very important, the king said, turning to the jury. They were just beginning to write this down on their slates when the White Rabbit interrupted. Unimportant, Your Majesty, means of course, in a very respectful tone, but he was frowning and making faces as he spoke. Unimportant, of course, I meant, the king said, and went on in an undertone. Important, unimportant, unimportant, important, as though he were trying to figure out which word sounded best. Some of the jury wrote it down important and some unimportant. Alice could see this, as she was near enough to look over their slates. But it doesn't matter a bit, she thought to herself. At this moment, the king, who had for some time been writing in his notebook, called out, "Silence," and read out from his book, "Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high leave the court." And everyone looked at Alice. "I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "You are." "Almost 2 miles high," said the king. "Well, I won't go at any rate," said Alice. "Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now." "It's the oldest rule in the book," said the king. "Then it should be number 1, said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook quickly. "Consider your verdict," he said to the jury in a low, trembly voice. "There's more evidence to come yet, please, Your Majesty," said the White Rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. "This paper has just been picked up." "What is on it?" said the Queen. "We haven't opened it yet," said the White Rabbit, "but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody." "It must have been that," said the king, "unless it was written to nobody, which isn't normal, you know." "Who is it directed to?" said one of the jurymen. "It isn't directed at all," said the White Rabbit. "In fact, there's nothing written on the outside." He unfolded the paper as he spoke and added, "It isn't a letter after all. It's a set of verses." "Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?" asked the juryman. "No, they're not," said the White Rabbit. "And that's the queerest thing about it." The jury all looked puzzled. "He must have imitated someone else's hand," said the king, and the jury all brightened up again. "Please, Your Majesty," said the knave, "I didn't write it, and they can't prove that I did. There's no name signed at the end." "If you didn't sign it," said the king, "that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you would have signed your name, like an honest man would." There was a general clapping of hands at this. It was the first truly clever thing the king had said all day. "That proves his guilt, of course," said the queen. "So off with his—" "It doesn't prove anything of the sort," said Alice. "Why, you don't even know what they're about." "Read them," said the king. The White Rabbit put on his spectacles. "Where shall I begin, please, Your Majesty?" he said. "Begin at the beginning," said the king, "and go on until you come to the end. Then stop." There was dead silence in the court while the White Rabbit read out these verses. "They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word that I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what would become of you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2, you gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before. If I or she should chance to be involved in this affair, he trusts you to set them free exactly as we were. My notion is that you had been, before she had this fit, an obstacle that came between him, ourselves, and it. Don't let him know she liked them best, for this must ever be a secret kept from all the rest, between yourself and me. This is the most important piece of evidence we have heard yet, said the king, rubbing his hands. So now let the jury. If any one of them can explain it, said Alice. She had gotten so large in the last few minutes that she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting the king. I'll give him a sixpence. I don't believe there's an atom's worth of meaning in it. The jury all wrote down on their slates, she doesn't believe there's an atom of meaning in it. But none of them tried to explain the paper. If there's no meaning in it, said the king, that saves a world of trouble, you know, as we needn't try to find any. And yet I don't know, he said, spreading the verses out on his knee and looking at them with one eye. I seem to see some meaning in them after all. Said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you? He said, turning to the knave. The knave shook his head sadly. Do I look like it? He said. Which he definitely did not, being made entirely out of cardboard. All right so far, said the king, and he went on muttering over the verses. We know it to be true. That's the jury, of course. If she should push the matter on, that must be the queen. What would become of you? What indeed? I gave her one, they gave him two. Why, that must be what he did with the tarts, you know. But it goes on, they all returned from him to you, said Alice. Why, there they are, said the king triumphantly, pointing to the tarts on the table. Nothing can be clearer than that. Then again, before she had this fit. You never had fits, my dear, I think, he said to the queen. Never, said the queen, furiously throwing an inkstand at the lizard as she spoke. The unfortunate little Bill had left off writing on his slate with one finger, as he found it made no marks, but he quickly began again, using the ink that was trickling down his face for as long as it lasted. And we have a picture of the king and some weird birds in wigs. Then the word fits does not fit you, said the king, looking around the court with a smile. There was dead silence. It's a pun, the king said in an angry voice, and everyone laughed. Let the jury consider the verdict, the king said for about the 20th time that day. No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, then verdict after. Stuff and nonsense, said Alice. The idea of having the sentence first. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice. Off with her head, the queen shouted at the top of her voice, but nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice. She had now grown to her full size by this time. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose in the air and came flying down at her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered out of the trees to her face. And we have another picture. Wake up, Alice, dear, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. had such a curious dream," said Alice. And she told her sister, as well as she could remember them, all of these strange adventures of hers that you have just been reading about. And when she finished, her sister kissed her and said, "It was a very curious dream, dear, certainly. But now run to your tea, it's getting late." So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well as she might, what a wonderful dream it had been. But her sister sat still just as she left her, leaning her head upon her hand, watching the setting sun and thinking of little Alice and all of her wonderful adventures, till she too began dreaming, and this was her dream. First, she dreamed about little Alice herself. Once again, the tiny hands clasped upon her knee, and the bright, eager eyes looking up into hers, and she could hear the very tones of her voice and see the queer little toss of her head to keep back the wandering hair that would always get into her eyes. And still, as she listened, or seemed to listen, the whole place around her became alive with the strange creatures of her little sister's dream. The long grass rustled at her feet as the white rabbit hurried by. The frightened mouse splashed his way through the neighboring pool. She could hear the rattle of the teacups as the March Hare and his friends shared their never-ending tea, and the shrill voice of the Queen ordering off her unfortunate guests to execution. Once more the pig baby was sneezing upon the Duchess's knee, while plates and dishes crashed around it. Once more the shriek of the griffin, the squeak of the lizard's pencil, and the choking of the suppressed guinea pigs filled the air, mixed up with the distant sobs of the miserable mock turtle. So she sat on, with closed eyes, half believing herself in Wonderland, though she knew she had to open them again, and everything would change to dull reality. The grass would be only rustling in the wind, and the pool rippling to the waving of the reeds. The rattling teacups would change to the tinkling sheep bells, and the Queen's shrill cries to the voice of the shepherd boy, and the sneeze of the baby, the shriek of the griffin, and all the other queer noises would change, she knew, to the confused clamor of the busy farmyard, while the lowing of the cattle in the distance would take the place of the mock turtle's sobs. Lastly, she pictured to herself how this same little sister of hers would, in the aftertime, be herself a grown woman, and how she would keep through all her riper years the simple and loving heart of her childhood, and how she would gather about her other little children and make their eyes bright and eager with many a strange tale. Perhaps even with the dream of Wonderland of long ago, and how she would feel with all their simple sorrows and find pleasure in the simple joys, remembering her own child life and those happy, happy summer days. And that is how Alice's adventures in Wonderland end, with her sister just dreaming of the future and Alice running off to tea. Interesting story. I still want to know what Alice was imbibing. What was in that tea, Alice? Also, it was very hard for me to not start chuckling at the whole Rule 42, because I know that 42 is a pop culture number. It's escaping me what the pop culture reference is on that. I think it's Rule 34 that's the naughty internet rule, but 42, 42 is the meaning of life. I knew there was something special about 42. I wonder if that came from here. It might have. Anyway, that is where we're going to leave this for today. Please do leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind. And don't forget, not tomorrow, because tomorrow is my regularly scheduled live stream of gaming, but Saturday night, join us at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we are going to be watching the copyright-free silent movie Alice in Wonderland. I think it's going to be a good time, especially because Aaron will be helping to provide the voices since it's a silent movie. But until then, we will be starting the Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There on Sunday night. So please do return then. But until then, thank you so much, and I will see you next time.